Hello everyone and welcome to Saanich Emerging Land, Emerging People. My name is Maria Koropecky and I am your host. And today I have a very special treat for you. In this episode, I'm going to be interviewing the Mayor of Saanich himself, Mayor Fred Haynes. So stick around and find out his vision for Saanich 7 generations into the future.
Hello Mary, I'm Fred Haynes, F-R-E-D-H-A-Y-N-E-S, Mayor of Saanich.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me here into your office.
Well, I'm delighted because the topic that you're doing your documentary on is Saanich Emerging Lands, Emerging People. And as we know, since 2018, since I became mayor, we've done quite a lot of work in terms of reconciliation, and what we like to think of as reconciliation with our First Nations. And I'll be delighted to talk about that with you today.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's perfect.
And as you can see here, we have a gift to us from the Saanich Leadership Council, which is the Lady Moon or the full moon. And as we know, we had a beautiful full moon this weekend. And this was given to us at the first time council to council sat down, that is the Saanich Council sat down with the Saanich Leadership Council to initiate our conversation about reconciliation and recognizing the place and the opportunity that we have in working together with our First Nations.
I am very honored to be here, and this conversation happened serendipitously.
It did. We came together for another important matter, which of course is the tragedy of the war in Ukraine. And our hearts go out and our eyes cry each day when we hear the news.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and we met a couple of weeks ago, and you sat next to me.
Yes. Seemed destiny. It seemed destiny because you started talking, I started talking, and we were, wow, there's this amazing connection because you have this interest in telling the story. And I said, well, actually, I believe we're in that story right now. Saanich, Emerging Lands, Emerging People.
Yes. It just happened while I was in the creative process of doing this TV series. You sat next to me as the mayor of Saanich.
Yes.
And it was just amazing. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
And so this series that I'm doing is about looking at the history of Saanich on Vancouver Island and how it's emerged through the times geologically and with the people who have come through. And we're also looking at how it's going to unfold into the future. So as someone who is the mayor of Saanich, you have a very interesting perspective on this whole area.
Yes. So as many people know, I've been in habitation on our First Nations territories as a guest for 20 years. I arrived here 20 years ago. And in some ways, I like to think I'm an accidental politician.
Oh.
I got into the political domain to work on housing, work on diversity, work on climate change. And this is where I've landed for my current part of this journey.
Oh.
But what we've said is, let's talk to everybody in this. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind are the First Nations. And we've done 3 years of work now and I'm just getting some information for us.
Oh,
but
wow.
This document shows what we're doing with the Saanich Leadership Council. You see that there? Just see the heading.
Yes.
And what we're doing is going forward with a memorandum of understanding where we're going government to government, that is council, Saanich Council, the leadership of Saanich, with the leadership of the Saanich people, to go forward with something called ATOL, ATOLNEUEL, ATONUL, which is respecting one another, memorandum of understanding. And what we've done is sit down and we've asked the Saanich leadership to be involved in our local area plans, for example, at Caddy Bay, and more importantly, Cordova Bay, where there was a significant generation after generation homestead for the Saanich people. And as Saanich people, as you know, it means people emergent. They survived the Great Flood by being on the top of a mountain and being saved by being in their canoes that were tied to the trees. So they talked about themselves as the emerging people. So it's quite remarkable that you chose that. And we're waiting for their feedback from our last meeting, where they're considering what we should do, for example, with Mount Doug, to change the name of Mount Doug to its First Nations or Saanich's name, which is Pecols. That's one item. The other is to respect their heritage and their burial sites and their interest in the land. But what's very interesting to me as well is when we look at the land through the eyes of First Nations, the land is connected into their culture. That is, they recognize the sea or the woods by the actual gifts of those resources to the First Nations for herbal medicines, medicinals of all kinds, for food of all kinds. And they have a very different way of looking at the planet, which I believe is where we're going to as a society with our increased awareness of the limitations of our planet to support man. The First Nations, when they language talks to us about their connection to the land, it's about sustainability, correct use of those resources for nurturing reasons, and respect of the land equally to respect of each other, because it's so connected. Without the land, the peoples can't survive.
Right.
So the people's place on the planet is to be gentle.
Yes.
It's to be respectful.
Yes.
And so I think that's one of the big learnings that we're going to have the advantage of by working more closely with our First Nations. So when we talk about respecting one another, it's not just as a people, but it's as a perspective on the land. What does the land, the ocean, the forests, the foods, the birds, the skies mean through the eyes of the Saanich peoples? And when we look at it through those eyes, or try to, and their language is heavily embedded in that reality, then we would come to an understanding that we need to respect the planet. We would come to an understanding to be gentle on the planet. And this idea of 7 generations, which is a First Nations way of thinking, think now for the next 7 generations, because we should be thinking now how to protect not just our children and grandchildren, but their children and grandchildren. And if we did that around the world, then I believe we'd have a more sustainable planet. Now I'm going to try something with you. Although you're here today to talk about Saanich, this I believe is a philosophy that will help us globally. And I believe when we talk to First Nations, and I remember we talked about this in our first meeting, that most First Nations, when you talk to them, because they're connected to the land around the world, they have similar ideas. The waters of the land that we fish, the rivers, the streams, take just what you need. The forest harvests just what you need. When you go hunting, hunt for just what you need. And don't waste. So these things, I think, globally, man is now having to struggle with. Because we realize the planet only has a certain carrying capacity. And they talk about the veins of life. The rivers and streams are the veins of life of land. When I'm now part of a one planet movement for the region. That is, how do we reduce our consumption from the 3.5, 4, 5 planets of consumption? Let's say Canada, the average Canadian consumes 4 planets worth. So could we do more to reduce our carbon? Could we grow food locally? Could we have more park space? because we have to plan now for 7 generations.
Yes.
And if we plan for 7 generations, instead of just the newest shiny thing or the newest clothing, we should think, what is the impact of buying lots of new clothing? What is the impact of having petroleum-based economy? How do we shift off that? I think now there's a global awareness, I believe, that's growing to say we have to change. And it's not just about carbon and greenhouse gases, it's about the total carrying capacity of the globe. First Nations believed in the carrying capacity of their territories. And they worked very well with neighbors in bartering and trading goods, respecting the carrying capacity of their area and sharing what they had through trade and barter with other First Nations. So I think that's an important dynamic, is there can be enough for everyone if we share. I think my job as mayor is to think about the next generation, and then their generation, and then their generation. I think 7 generations out. So our climate action, our saving of parks. We've just acquired several new parks in Saanich, green space, the green space at Jubilee Hospital, the Cleanest Community Natural Green Space. We bought 56 acres at Mountain Road with the CRD, Habitat Acquisition Trust. We've all worked on that. We've inspired people to bequeath land to Saanich. We've acquired some plots of additional land around the Swan Lake Nature Sanctuary, because we must preserve this for 7 generations out, and then they will preserve it for 7 generations out. So I think that point of view of the First Nations, which I believe is theirs, is going to help us all survive the next 100, 200 and more years.
Oh, wow.
Emerging people. How are our people going to emerge through the current climate crisis? How are we going to emerge through the current housing crisis? The current lack of doctors crisis? We must work together and plan. Not just for today or tomorrow, but for 7 generations.
Oh my gosh. It's amazing that you're thinking about this.
So when I see the Memorandum of Understanding, which is online at our website, Atalnil, respecting one another. That also includes the respect for the planet, how we all have to share this planet and preserve it and save it for our future generations. It's been a wonderful eye-opener for me listening to the knowledge of the Saanich Leadership Council. I was in a special ceremony with council where 5 chiefs, the 5 chiefs of the Saanich nations, and myself formed a group of 6, and we ceremonially paddled into the hall, and we have this paddle which has Atalnil printed on it, the logo of the Saanich people, the logo of Saanich. It's the premier place in the council chamber. So everybody now who comes into Saanich council chamber to see our council at work will see that paddle, and it symbolizes that we're working together with the Saanich Leadership Council, and we're looking for their guidance. And right now, we're waiting for their decision on how much land should be included in the naming of Pacoles. Should it be just the geographic mounting or the whole park or more? So we didn't say we're going to tell you, we said tell us, what does your history, what does your culture, what does your oral history tell you is the appropriate geographic location for that naming? Working together means we let the Saanich Leadership Council guide us. This is linked to, if we use the term decolonization. Reconciliation, to ask for guidance, true guidance, government-to-government guidance from the Saanich Leadership Council. That way, we let their culture, their understanding emerge into the Saanich Council, which is the elected body by the residents of Saanich. So we want their culture, their understanding to emerge through our work. Every meeting now, at the start of council or our committees, we recognize the territorial lands on which we stand, of the Lohongwing and the Saanich people. Emerging lands, emerging people means we have to look to the past, look to the knowledge keepers of the past to plan the future. Does this make sense, Marie?
It's beautiful.
The way we save the trees and the way we save the lands is to put urban density for housing, which we need, in the right place. We have an urban containment boundary, and we want to put our density along our corridor centres and villages. That lets us have a climate action approach to housing, to address the housing crisis. We want our elders to live and age in place together with youth. So we're doing garden suites, we're doing infill housing. We're trying to build affordable housing, density housing along our corridors and centres. That means in part options for where we can gentle infill with single family, but also apartments, both rental and market, and small scale to let seniors who are living in a large house downsize and live locally. Because we know if you age in place with all your neighbours and friends, you have a much better age. And if you have parents who can live close to their children, and one of the ideas we brought forward a year ago was garden suites, so the parents could put a garden suite on their home, their children can live in there, or they can live in the house and the parents move into the garden suite, or they can rent it out. The whole idea is to build community vibrancy. And it's about elders looking after their children and the children looking after their elders. And that, of course, is a big part of First Nations culture.
Yes, I was going to say that.
Intergenerational support.
Yes.
So you'd have your daycare there and you'd have your senior care right there.
Yes.
So that's another piece. I started that in 2016.
Oh, wow. Because we've become so fragmented.
We have. We're fragmented. We're losing that cultural and intergenerational connection.
Yes. When you were speaking, I got shivers and I could see your passion in your eyes. Is this something that when you were growing up, is this something that you aspired
No, as I said, I'm an accidental politician.
Oh, right, that's right.
I was doing this work and people said, well, we should get you elected so you can do it on a bigger scale.
Oh.
Yeah, so I said, okay, let's have a run at that. So I have my own 3 sons. They're 28, 27 and 25. My wife gave me permission to be away from the family, and that my children were at the age, hey, Dad, go do something and be busy elsewhere. Right, which was fun, and they helped with everything. We and it was just the right time for me. So I'm the accidental politician, but I really believe fundamentally with passion in the things that we're talking about today.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. Are you writing a book or anything like that?
Actually, it's very interesting you say that. I believe I'm living the book.
Oh.
I'm living the book through my actions as mayor. We're trying to do more on climate change. We're doing more on housing. We're doing more on preserving green space, local food. We're trying to improve the infrastructure for our cycling and safe streets. We're trying to move everything we can in my role as mayor. So I'm actually living the book right now.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm not writing the book.
Okay.
But the book is being written in the new bylaws and policies and procedures that we're implementing. One thing we did, which is quite interesting, we decided to merge together our 2 units that look after the environment. One is the environmental services, together with our parks and recreation. Both of those groups have expertise in biodiversity, plants, understanding, policies, and rather than having 2 separate groups, we put them together. We think that'll make it more impactful to look after our natural environment.
Yes.
So we're doing so much of this. I don't have time to write right now, but maybe later. And as you know, I am running for re-election. So I hope to be able to continue living this book.
Oh, wonderful. And the sirens are saying yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed today. Yes. I'm delighted to be included, and I hope I've given you some insight into the amazing emerging Saanich, emerging people journey that we're on with reconciliation. And we see today the Lady Moon, and we see the work that we need to do in Ukraine.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yes.